In 5th place, we have Ed's paintings. So long before they were famed ghost hunters investigating the Amityville horror and featured in films such as The Conjuring, Ed and Lorraine had a much different hobby. Painting. Actually, it was how the duo made a living. Ed Warren was a trained fine arts painter. The duo traveled all over the country to sell their paintings, and they also taught art classes. The couple used Ed's paintings as a way to gain entry into houses they wanted to investigate. They would research houses they believed to be haunted, and then drive to the house. After Ed painted the house in question, he would then hand the painting to Lorraine, who would go up, knock on the door, and offer the homeowners the painting, which would usually turn into a conversation about the property and the hauntings. This process was how their investigative career began. Ed became known for his barn door art, painting tranquil winter scenes on stained pine, which was all the rage for adorning the wood grain halls of any home in the late 60s, and apparently these paintings are now quite rare. Many of his paintings that have been photographed feature different haunted houses, and examples of his art and calligraphy style are displayed throughout the museum. In 4th place, we have black magic masks. These fall under the practice of tulpa, which is a concept in theosophy, mysticism, and the paranormal of a materialized thought form, typically in human form such as an imaginary friend or being that is created through spiritual practice and intense concentration. In simpler English, the masks act as a representation of the practice, which is a form of mysticism that involves creating sentient and autonomous beings separate from oneself. So, an imaginary friend? The concept of tulpas and their creation, including the word tulpa, come from a close-in Tibetan Buddhist practice, with tulpa being a Tibetan word for creature of the mind. Tulpas did not become part of Western paranormal lore until the 1970s, and those who practice have been cited as wearing masks similar to Halloween ones in order to take on the appearance of whatever the mask looks like. I guess that explains why I've seen many cheap-looking Halloween masks in the video walkthroughs from the museum, so I suppose I'll retract my statements that I made about how pathetic they look. If anyone is curious about modern practices and appropriations of tulpamancers, the interweb origins can be traced back to 4chan message boards in 2009, and no, if you don't know what that means, I'm not going to elaborate on just how cursed that sentence was to utter. Oh, it gets worse. Alright. The communities gained popularity when adult fans of My Little Pony started discussing tulpas of characters from the Friendship is Magic television series. The fans attempted to use meditation and lucid dreaming techniques to create imaginary friends. Look, I knew someone back in high school who fell under that subculture, and he was the furthest thing from mentally stable. The guy had people munching fantasies as well. Time to move on before I get nightmares again. In 3rd place, we have a satanic idol. So this story began in 1991 when a deer hunter was walking through the woods in Connecticut, close to where Ed and Lorraine resided. The hunter got lost and after some time stumbled upon a raised, circular rock formation with the idol in question standing in the middle of it. It is believed that the formation was common with folks who practiced devil worship in the 70s. The hunter began to feel uncomfortable and left the area, deciding to make his way back to his car, and along the way he noticed an elderly gentleman walking alongside him who was dressed head to toe in black. Now the man in black never spoke a single word to the deer hunter. The hunter was getting more nervous by the second, and also more lost and unsure of his directional path. Desperate, he turned to the mysterious figure and simply asked, "How do I get out of here?" Luckily for our narrator, the man in black pointed in a direction and then disappeared. The hunter was so thrown off by that day that he reached out to Ed, who requested to be brought to the same area. The hunter wasn't 100% sure he could find the exact location, but was willing to try. Together, the men were able to stumble through the forest, and without the aid of the man in black this time, found the rock formation. Ed removed the demonic idol from the area and placed it at home in his museum, and that's when things got a little weirder. Because, you know, a man in black spotting and weird forest stuff isn't weird enough for us. Approximately 3 days after removing the idol, Lorraine collapsed for no known reason, and she was transported to the hospital where no one could identify what was wrong with her. Thankfully, after 3 more days, she recovered. Red flag time! 3s and 6s are very popular numbers amongst the demonic scary people and things that you want to avoid. Ed believed that this was caused by the gentleman in black, who was believed to have been a high priest in a satanic cult, as a form of payback for removing the satanic idol. Now, this idol remains in the Warrens Museum to this day, and honestly, I think it looks like a papier-mâché masterpiece of an alien, but please let me know in the comments if anyone out there has a different opinion. In 2nd place, we have a shadow doll. So among one of the first haunted items visible in the museum to visitors is a shadow doll, which boasts bird feathers and a genuine human tooth. Unlike the other dolls included in the museum, I'd consider this creature more of a sculpture. Ergo, why she made her way to my list today. Also, she's just overall terrifying to look at. I'm calling it now. she better join the TV universe soon. So a shadow doll is a statue or deity of sorts that is made specifically for harm and to be used at the center of curses. I happen to know the steps for the most common curse, and while I'll leave out a step for safety, yes, I promise I'll elaborate. So the caster would first need to take a picture of the doll, write a curse on the back of the photo, and then send it to whomever the curse is aimed for. The person who receives the picture with the curse will sadly invite that curse into their lives. I'm thinking, oh, totally forgot. The doll will also appear in that person's dreams. While not too much is known about the origins of this specific doll, it was initially purchased in a vintage store under the assumption that it was, simply an antique. I have a couple of antique dolls myself, and I'm shuddering to think about what they would do if activated by any kind of curse. They've already got enough of a personality. Thanks. In our first place, we have a copy of Crying Boy. So when Bob Smith was a young child in the 70s, he became fascinated by a painting in his grandmother's house. The painting was a cheap print of a well-known piece and was hung on the living room wall. The photo depicted a boy who was a similar age to Bob, and for some reason, looked sad and downcast, with tears brimming from his troubled eyes. A few years after the painting went up on the wall, there was a devastating kitchen fire in the house. While the kitchen was destroyed, the rest of the house was undamaged. The painting was eventually sold in a garage sale to Ed Warren himself. For years it puzzled Bob why his grandmother got rid of the painting, until he read a series of articles about a cursed painting. Yep, that painting was The Crying Boy. That's the title of the painting. The Crying Boy was one in a series of paintings by artist Giovanni Abramelin that was completed in the 1950s. The series depicted young, teary-eyed younglings. While it may seem strange to want an image of a weeping child on your wall, the pictures proved popular all over the world. For example, in the UK alone, over 50,000 copies were sold. The children represented were often poor and very beautiful. In total, Giovanni painted over 60 paintings, and up until the early 80s, prints and reprints of his images continued to be mass-produced. In 1985, the most popular tabloid newspaper in the United Kingdom printed a story that caused panic and ended the popularity of his work. The Sun published an article entitled Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy, describing the terrible experience of May and Ron Hall after their home was destroyed by fire. The cause of the fire, much like Bob's grandmother's, was a greasy pan that overheated and burst into flames. The fire spread rapidly and destroyed everything on the ground floor of the home. Only one item remained intact: print of the Crying Boy on their living room wall. Distraught at their loss, the devastated couple made the bizarre claim that the painting was cursed, and it, not the pan, was the cause of the fire. Now, this tale probably would have disappeared into the archives of strange and mysterious stories, except for one, tiny thing. A firefighter claimed that he had attended at least 15 house fires where everything was destroyed except for prints of the Crying Boy, which would remain completely intact. So before long, this gathered momentum, and a rash of fires all over the world were blamed on the Cursed Child, not to be confused with the play that's currently running of the same name. In subsequent articles, the Sun went on to claim that a woman had lost her house to a fire 6 months after buying the painting. 2 sisters had fires in their homes after buying a copy of the painting, when one sister even claimed to have seen her painting sway backwards and forwards on the wall while it was happening. A concerned woman on the Isle of Wight attempted to burn her painting without success, and then went on to suffer a run of very bad luck. A gentleman in Nottingham who possessed a print of the painting lost his home, and his family was injured. A pizza parlor got destroyed, including every painting on their walls, except for the Crying Boy. When the Sun reported that even rational firefighters refused to have a copy of this painting in their homes, the reputation of the Crying Boy was damned forever. In all these cases, and many more that were reported, paintings of the Crying Boy went unharmed. Eventually, there was an image of a crying child by any artist in a house that went on fire. Now, some folks claimed that they experienced bad luck if they attempted to destroy or even get rid of the paintings, while others were convinced that it was only a matter of time before disaster struck them. The Sun eventually offered the frightened public a solution. On Halloween night of 1985, hundreds of the paintings were collected together by the newspaper and burnt under the supervision of the fire brigade. So, why would this seemingly innocent series of paintings be cursed? Theories ranged from the little boy being from a Romani family who placed a curse on the artist, to others claiming that the subject of the painting had died in a fire and his spirit was trapped in the art. The most enduring story claimed that the boy accidentally set fire to the studio of Giovanni Abramelin. Simply put, wherever the little orphan went, fires mysteriously followed, earning him the name Diablo or Devil. In 5th place, we have a cursed wallet. So this tale begins in October of 1972 when an officer at the United States Military Academy contacted the Warrens a day before they were scheduled to present a lecture to the cadets there, informing them that a curious security problem had arisen and, could they possibly help? Now, obviously they said yes, or else we wouldn't be talking right now. So the next day, at a little past 4 in the afternoon, they entered the gates of the academy and were escorted to the office of Major Donald Wilson. So the Major went on to explain how an unaccountable breach of security was occurring in the home of West Point's commanding general. Ed asked the Major if he knew the nature of the problem, to which the man replied that there was a ghost in the general's quarters. So the Warrens were soon escorted to meet the general and his wife, where they were directed into a sitting room, where the general explained that, well, nothing macabre had happened. A number of curious incidents had occurred without any kind of explanation. So, some background, in the basement of that building there is a private study that at the time was kept locked and secure, but no matter how many times the bunk in there was made up, it was always found ripped apart later. Upstairs, ghosts had been seen flitting about the house. Oh, and personal belongings and other important articles were regularly found missing. The man emphasized not stolen, but just missing temporarily. Later, all these stolen items would be found upstairs, neatly laid out on the dresser in the general's bedroom. So he asked Ed if this could be, caused by a ghost, and Ed confirmed that it was indeed a possibility, and probably like a human ghosty and not a demonic spirit. Lorraine offered to walk throughout the home to try and, establish where the spirit might be present, while Ed and Major Wilson headed for the basement with the key to the downstairs study. As usual, the bunk was torn apart as though someone had been sleeping in it, while nothing else was disturbed. So while Lorraine did her walk through the house, she picked up impressions of the powerful individuals who had spent time in the home in many, many years over the years, but hardly any sense of a mischievous spirit. She offered to enter a trance state later that evening, after the presentation, to attempt to contact the spirit, and the group, was like, alright, you do you, let's try this. So much later that night, after the events of the day, the group made its way upstairs to the MacArthur bedroom. All lights were turned off but one, and Lorraine closed her eyes. She described seeing a black man wearing a dark uniform with no markings, who was overtaken with a sense of fear, guilt, and lack of acceptance. He told her that he'd been accused of killing, and his cell was in the basement, but the army had exonerated him of that crime. He was very sorry, and could not hold his sorrow any longer. He told her that his name was Greer, and spelled it out clearly for Lorraine, and she was able to convince him to pass over into the light. So after she exited her trance, Lorraine gave a complete description of the man and said at the end that he had simply vanished, and mentioned that he had left his wallet in that downstairs bunker. So the general is adamant that based on the uniform Lorraine had described, no black men had served at West Point during that time. But, he mentioned he would look into it and thank the Warrens for their time. Goodbye, alright, sure. A few weeks later though, Ed and Lorraine received a phone call from the general. It was discovered that a black man, a porter by the name of, Greer, had served there. So he had been assigned to the Thayer mansion in the early 19th century, and he'd been accused of committing death, but the army did exonerate him of it. His records had been out of order, and he would now be officially filed as deceased. Also, the walls in the bunker had been renovated, and the wallet was finally found. What do you know? The army offered to mail it to the Warrens just to be safe, and it has stayed in their museum ever since. In 4th place, we have the Snedeker family rosary beads. And as you might expect, this true story begins in the witching hour, in the wee small hours of the morning. Because if rosary beads aren't scary enough. One night, very late at night, Ed and Lorraine were contacted by this family who had just moved into a house on Meriden Avenue in Southington. Specifically, the mother of the family unit and a niece who came to stay with the family were on the phone. And, so originally what they found and bought was a big and seemingly welcoming home. But what they didn't know when they bought it was that it was a former funeral home. Oh, and fun fact, the morticians at the funeral home were allegedly involved in necrophilia, or performing sex acts with corpses. And what used to be the showroom for the coffins was now where the younglings were. And just down the hall from that was the place where the bodies were prepared for viewing. Yeah, not grim at all. So the boys were the first to start talking about things they had seen and experienced, saying they were absolutely terrified, and the parents, chastised them at first for it, but the boys were so scared they started sleeping on the floor in the living room. Among the sounds they would hear were the sound of chains pulling the coffins upstairs, and there were no more coffins in the house. So the woman who called the Warrens were terrified, with the niece in a small bedroom in the back of the house, and the covers on her bed were levitating around her like there was a fan blowing them around. Lorraine said while the mother was on the phone with her, even more bizarre events started happening. So remember those rosary beads? Yeah, she had them in her hand, and while she was speaking, the beads were actually being pulled apart and falling to the floor. Lorraine and Ed went over the next morning with the family's parish priest, and a blessing of the house seemed to do absolutely nothing to calm things down. And that's when the Warrens decided to call the bishop's office. So the church eventually sent an exorcist, which seemed to sort of do the trick, but not before one last hurrah from whatever the heck was believed to be haunting the house, because demons don't like to give up without a fight. There was this huge tree in front of the house, and half the tree, with no wind, broke off and fell on the property. The family moved the heck out of Dodge a short time later, and Ed and Lorraine kept the rosary beads that had been pulled apart, because if a demonic spirit can touch a Catholic relic, that means it's been infested with something absolutely awful, and they didn't want to risk the beads spreading throughout the world and causing even more damage. Yeah, that makes sense. In third place, we have a long black spike. So what appears to the innocent eye is like nothing but like a fence stake, perhaps left over from a construction project of sorts, actually holds a history of sadness and evil doing. Being the oldest item listed today, its history dates back to its use in like the 1700s. While the name of the witch it belonged to has been lost to time, the spike was originally used in a black mass ritual in an attempt to summon Satan himself to this world. The witch we're speaking of had attempted to curse the stake over the course of her pregnancy, hoping that it would become strong enough to take the soul of her womb in exchange for the devil. During the ritual, she plunged the stake into the flesh as sacrifice, but while it strengthened her relationship with Satan, it did not succeed in bringing him to earth. The stake was passed down as a family heirloom, bringing a feeling of longing and sadness to any that held it until it was finally acquired by the Warrens. Knowing that the museum is technically closed, I worry if any vandals break in, the damage they could do with something that looks so unassuming, but it's so dangerous. In second place, we have the Carlson's knick-knacks. So, this happily married couple in their 30s bought this old inn in New England. No big. So, Nathan Carlson traveled a lot during the week, but his wife, Alexandra, was home all the time to take care of their 2 daughters. Not long after moving in, Mrs. Carlson and her daughter began hearing footsteps on the second floor where, in the past, lodgers used to stay. During the afternoon and late into the night, they'd hear dragging, heavy-booted footsteps move across the floor above them. Mrs. Carlson's older sister, who lived nearby, occasionally stayed overnight in the house and also heard these footsteps. The Carlsons had rooms set aside elsewhere in the house for, live-in farm help, and these men would hear the footsteps walking in circles around their bed. Sometimes, while Mrs. Carlson would be asleep at night, she'd be awakened by the spirits in the home, which would actually yank the covers off the bed while she was, in it. She later found out that very same thing happened to the farm help, which explained why the men tended to, quit so soon after they were hired. Eventually, the infestation phenomena upgraded into whisperings that could be heard behind closed doors. However, when Mrs. Carlson or her older sister checked the room where the whisperings were coming from, there was never anyone present. Although these spirits projected words that were often audible enough to be heard, the woman could never quite identify the language that was being used. And as time went on, the harassment continued. After the missus would straighten up the house, knickknacks and other little items would never be quite where she left them. Outside the house at night, lights would be seen in the attic, although there was no electricity up there. While painting a room one day, the heat was suddenly drawn away, and Mrs. Carlson felt a hand touch her shoulder. She said she became so angry that she threw the paintbrush in the direction where she believed the entity to be, and told it out loud, "I don't know who you are or what you want, but you're not gonna get me." Oh yeah, real smart. So this phenomenon went on almost daily, since this infestation had occurred in the house a long time ago. Exact date unknown. Both the kitchen and the bathroom water faucets would suddenly turn themselves on, full force at the same time. And on occasion, Mrs. Carlson would hear 3 knocks at the front door, which, that's a sign of an inhuman presence. But whenever she'd go to the door, there would be nobody there. On the second floor, a visitor reported seeing a snake on the window ledge after hearing 3 taps on the window, yet there was no nearby tree the reptile could have climbed. Ew, snakes, nope. Oh, it gets worse. While living in the house, the Carlsons had another spawn. And one night, while the missus was watching television in the living room, she suddenly heard a tremendous, powerful explosion. When she jumped up to check, thinking the furnace had kaboomed, she found the door to the infant's room violently torn open. Objects were still swinging and vibrating, and the temperature in the nursery was equal to a meat locker. Although the spirits in the home had evidently tried to kill the youngling, the little one managed to live through the experience. Thank goodness. However, when the spawn reached 3 years of age, Mrs. Carlson was walking past him as he played with some knickknacks from the living room, when he suddenly let go with a loud shriek saying, "You stepped on Beatrice!" So Mrs. Carlson put down the laundry she'd been carrying and asked, "Who?" To which he responded that Beatrice was his friend who told him what to do. Mrs. Carlson then told her son to ask Beatrice who she was, and after a pause he replied that Beatrice had told him to tell her that she's a witch. So the mom took away the items the boy was playing with and almost sent him into hysterics in the process. She tossed him into a basket in her bedroom closet, somewhere the boy was forbidden to go without her permission, and didn't really think about it until later that night when she was in bed by herself and saw a large black form in the room with her. She described the entity as being, blacker than the blackest night, moving slowly around the room, freezing her with fright. I swear I'm not a poet. Before the black mask went away, it transmuted into a globe of synthetic light about the size of a basketball, while producing a deafening roar, which she compared to a blasted furnace. This went on for many nights until the Warrens were called in, and like many other times I've mentioned today, took a tour of the home, blessed it, and realized the knickknacks were directly tied to the entity. Now, they've never described them in detail, so I don't have any clear photos to discuss today, but I'm assuming they're around the size of action figures if a 3-year-old was able to play with them. In first place, we have Bathsheba's jewelry box. So this is probably the most famous case on today's list. In January of 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange occurrences almost immediately. So this started with events that most of us probably wouldn't even register. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to move from place to place on its own, and the young girls of the home began to notice spirits around the house. Carolyn then brought it upon herself to research the history of the home and discovered that it had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of them had passed under mysterious or horrible circumstances. The most haunting spirit of the home is that of witch Bathsheba Sherman. Being fairly well off, Bathsheba and her husband Judson had a son, Herbert, born when Bathsheba was about 37 years old, and while the couple gave birth to 3 others, they were unable to survive past the age of 7. One of the passings of a neighbor's ward in her care drew public attention during a post-mortem examination, when it was determined that the fatal wound was caused by a large sewing needle that had been impaled at the base of the skull. It's believed Bathsheba took offense to Carolyn moving into what she considered her home and wanted to take back that control. So the most notable incident overall was one afternoon when Carolyn said that she had been lying on the sofa and out of nowhere felt a piercing type of pain in her calf, and then the muscle began to spasm. And upon examination, she noticed a puddle of redness at the point of impact. She checked her bees or anything else that could have caused the puncture in her leg, but found nothing. In her daughter's book, Andrea Perron describes the wound as perfectly circular, as if a large sewing needle had impaled her skin. Now, if I were to summarize the entire hell the Perron family endured for the decade they lived in what they referred to as the Old Arnold estate, we'd be here for an hour. But during one of the last instances, the Warrens were called in to help the ailing family, and they removed a box from the home after thoroughly blessing it, believing that it was acting as a conduit for Bathsheba's demonic energy to affect the home, this being the jewelry box. In 5th place, we have a satanic idol. This story began in 1991 when a deer hunter was walking through the woods in Connecticut, close to where Ed and Lorraine resided. The hunter got lost and after some time stumbled upon a raised, circular rock formation with the idol in question standing in the middle of it. It is believed that the formation was common with folks who practiced devil worship in the 70s. The hunter began to feel uncomfortable and left the area, deciding to make his way back to his car, and along the way he noticed an elderly gentleman walking alongside him who was dressed in head-to-toe black. The man in black never spoke a single word to the deer hunter. Now the hunter was getting more nervous by the second, and also more lost, and unsure of his directional path. Desperate, he turned to the mysterious figure and simply asked, "How do I get out of here?" Luckily for our narrator, the man in black pointed in a direction and then disappeared. The hunter was so thrown off by that day that he reached out to Ed, who requested to be brought to the same area. Now the hunter wasn't 100% sure he could find the exact location, but was willing to try. Together, the 2 men were able to stumble through the forest, and without the aid of the man in black this time, found the rock fountain. Ed removed the demonic idol from the area and placed it in the museum, and that's when things got a little weirder. Approximately 3 days after removing the idol, Lorraine collapsed for no known reason, and she was transported to the hospital where no one could identify what was wrong with her. Thankfully, after 3 more days, she recovered. Now Ed believed that this was caused by the gentleman in black, who was believed to have been a high priest in a satanic cult, as a form of payback for removing the satanic idol. In 4th place, we have a Conjuring book. So one night, after returning home from a night out with Ed, Lorraine was reviewing the calls left on the answering machine when she found one from a distraught woman who introduced herself as a Mrs. Sandy Foster, who nervously described a very distressing situation and begged the Warrens to return her call. So even though it was 12:40 in the morning, Lorraine immediately tried to call her back, and while the phone rang continuously, the connection was broken. Lorraine tried a few more times, going so far as to contact the phone operator and the operator's supervisor, who ran tests on the phone line and frustratingly didn't find anything weird. The next day, when the Warrens returned home from church, Lorraine immediately phoned the Foster home again. This time, Mrs. Foster answered the phone on the second ring and mentioned that the phone had never rang the night before, and Lorraine made the decision to go pay the Fosters a visit that afternoon. She and Ed arrived at around 2 p.m. and met not only Mrs. Foster and her husband, but also their 3 offspring, Abby, Joel, and Hannah, who had experienced most of the phenomena. Ed arranged his recording gear on a nearby table while Lorraine asked her permission to walk the house, which she was immediately granted. Mrs. Foster brought up that her daughter Meg, the 3 offspring, Abby, Joel, and Meg, who had experienced most of the phenomena. Ed arranged his recording gear on a nearby table while Lorraine asked her permission to walk the house, which she was immediately granted. Mrs. Foster brought up that her daughter Meg had always been interested in the occult and had purchased a book on Conjuring as a gift for Meg, and based off of the description Ed gave of it, I believe it was a copy of the Ars Goetia. Now Meg admitted to attempting to summon a few of the spirits in the book, but had lost hope because nothing had happened. Ed prompted further, asking for specifics on the experiences that had happened in the last week when only the younglings were home. So, let's set the scene. The boys were already in bed, and Meg had just taken a shower. After going downstairs to make sure the doors were locked and, the lights were off, Meg returned upstairs to the sounds of running water, and the faucets had turned back on without any human's touch. Now downstairs, the lights and the radio had turned back on as well. Meg went downstairs and watched the radio dial moving on its own. After turning it off again, she got halfway up the stairs when she felt an icy cold hand touch her on the shoulder, just for a second in the dark. Now Meg bolted up the rest of the stairs, into her room, shut the door, turned off the lights, and hid under her covers. Outside the door, sounds of heavy footsteps caused her to suddenly shake under her covers. And then, more noises joined in with the mysterious steps. A door downstairs slammed shut, accompanied by furniture being pushed around and crashing, almost as if an angry person had broken into remodel. When Meg was able to open her eyes again, she saw a silver light come out of the woods and glide into her room. The next thing she knew, some hand yanked her hair 3 times. Each time it pulled harder, until the 3rd time it made her eyes water. Now, she ran into her brother's room for safety, and he confirmed that he was also terrified by hearing the assorted unknown noises, accompanied by loud whispering he could not make out. The duo eventually gathered enough courage to call their parents at the home they were at, but by the time the adults returned, all of the paranormal action had paused, and they were convinced the offspring were making it up. On the second occasion, everything that happened was almost the same as the first, but this time they involved the family dog, who was snarling at something that no one could see. Now, Joel remembered it as strange because the dog was deaf and could barely hear noise. So when the Wards were hiding in a bedroom on this occasion, instead of a silver figure, they saw a dark purplish cloud that they were unable to look at directly. So Lorraine at this point had returned and reported that she had experienced an inhuman presence throughout the home and asked Meg if she possessed, black conjuring candles in her room. And when she responded yes, Ed told the family that he and Lorraine can handle everything, but they should maybe head out for a drive while it was happening, for safety. Ed and Lorraine got to work the moment the Fosters left, determined to discover the true nature of the spirit's presence in order to dispel it. For provocation purposes, Ed used a crucifix and holy water, scattering the water at all 4 points of the cellar floor, and saying aloud, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command all spirits, whether human or diabolical, to leave this dwelling and never return." On the first floor, Ed repeated the same procedure in each of the rooms. This process, known to any exorcist as binding, requires the infesting spirit to either show itself or move on. Having bound the cellar and all downstairs room without incident, the Warrens were ready to approach the second floor, where they knew difficulty was lurking. But as they prepared to act, a telepathically projected feeling of dread came over them, which is a distinct indication of an inhuman demonic presence. They pressed on and began climbing the staircase to the second floor. But as hard as they tried, neither Ed nor Lorraine could get any more than halfway up, pushing against them with some impenetrable, unyielding force. So slowly, the Warrens backed down the stairs so as not to be knocked over backwards. And at the bottom of the stairs, for a brief second, diabolical laughter rang out. So, annoyed, Ed threw more holy water on the stairs, which caused the pressure to diminish enough to let them reach the top. They were able to bind almost all the rooms without incident, saving Meg's for last. Ed swung the door wide open, and he and Lorraine immediately felt the need to take a step back from the horrible sense of misery emanating from the room. With a steely composure, Ed walked into the room, cross in hand. Though no physical presence was there to be seen, the bedroom was freezing cold. One last time, Ed threw holy water in all 4 corners of the room, commanding, "Give us some sign of departure or an exorcism will be conducted here this very day." Almost instantly, the morbid sense of misery began to drain away, and the temperature in the room gradually returned to normal. So Meg's bedroom did contain those black conjuring candles, occult vestments, and books containing the rites for rituals of all sorts. Ed placed the items in the gal's trash basket, set them out in the hallway, and then sealed the room by reading a prescribed prayer of sanctification. He brought them back to his home for safekeeping, and that's one copy of the Ars Goetia I have no need to read. Thank you. See? I've told y'all, don't summon beings! In third place, we have a shadow doll. Among one of the first haunted items visible to those who visit the Warren Occult Museum is a shadow doll, which boasts bird feathers and a genuine human tooth, and she's just overall terrifying to look at. I'm calling it now, she better join that TV universe one day. For reference, a shadow doll is a statue or deity of sorts that is made specifically for harm to be used at the center of curses. I happen to know the steps for the most common curse, and while I'll leave out a step for safety, I promise I'll elaborate. Now, the caster would first need to take a picture of the doll, write a curse on the back of the photo, and then send it to whoever the curse is aimed for. Hopefully you've got their mailing address. The person who receives the picture with the curse will sadly invite that curse into their lives. Oh, almost forgot. The doll is also going to appear in that person's dreams, so enjoy your nightmares, folks. While not too much is known about the origins of this specific doll, it was initially purchased in a secondhand store under the assumption that it was simply, an antique. I've got a couple of old dolls myself, and I'm shuddering to think about what they would do if activated by any kind of curse. Some of them talk enough already. In second place, we have black magic math, which is a concept in theosophy, mysticism, and the paranormal, of a materialized thought form, typically in human form such as an imaginary friend or being that is created through spiritual practice and intense concentration. In simpler English, the masks act as a representation of the practice, which is a form of mysticism that involves creating sentient and autonomous beings separate from oneself. The concept of tulpas and their creation, including the word tulpa, come from a closed Tibetan Buddhist practice, with tulpa being a Tibetan word for a creature of the mind. Tulpas did not become part of Western paranormal paranormal lore until around the 1970s, and those who practice have been cited as wearing masks similar to Halloween ones in order to take on the appearance of whatever the mask looks like. If anyone is curious about modern practices and appropriations of tulpamancers, the interweb origins can be traced back to 4chan message boards in 2009, and I'm not going to elaborate on just how awful that sentence was to utter. Oh, it gets worse. The communities gained popularity when adult fans of My Little Pony started discussing tulpas of characters from the Friendship is Magic television series. The fans attempted to use meditation and lucid dreaming techniques to create imaginary friends. Well, I think that about sums that up, don't you? In first place, we have the Black Lace Veil. So after one of their many public lectures, Ed was conversing with a couple that had been in the audience, where the boy introduced himself as Alan and explained that he'd brought his girlfriend Lonnie to the lecture because he suspected that she'd been overtaken by some occult influence. He explained that when his girlfriend became angry, her features would change into something resembling a wolf, and then the voice of a different person would speak from inside her. When Lorraine walked over to join the group, Lonnie experienced an episode of instantaneous possession and lurched out in an attempt to attack Lorraine. This incident terrified everyone in the vicinity, with the Warrens ending the audience chat session immediately, before Ed escorted the couple to an offstage room while Lorraine stayed outside. In the backstage room, the girl was fully under possession, breathing heavily, and her facial features had transformed into the wolf-like appearance the boy had talked about. After about 10 minutes, the possession passed, and Lonnie was lucid enough to explain, dealing with memory loss, along with losing hours and days of her life over the last 3 months, which is a symptom common in possession. She went on to share that originally her now boyfriend, Alan, had refused all of her advances and bribery attempts at becoming hers, and she had resorted to visiting a store prominent in selling tools to help with witchcraft, purchasing there a book on the black arts, and later that night performing a ritual for acquiring lovers. This ritual involved, you guessed it, the black lace veil, on top of which she placed a crown of goat horns before renouncing God and her baptism, along with swearing allegiance to Satan, finishing the ritual by washing down the vow with a cup of animal scarlet elixir. About a month after Lonnie performed the ritual, Alan began paying her the attention she craved, making her entitled world perfect. What she hadn't counted on, however, was that she was now in debt to the demonic, having given them permission to enter her life. Ed knew immediately that Lonnie would have to undergo an exorcism as soon as possible, and made contact with a priest the next morning, who was able to come assist with the procedure. Upon arrival, the priest insisted on testing the spirit, so he instructed Lonnie to close her eyes and slowly count to 20, while his assistant stood behind her and placed a cross around 6 inches behind her head. The entity possessing the girl suddenly went wild, screaming, "Take it away, it burns! Take it away!" During the exorcism, it kept screaming, "She's mine! She's mine! Her soul is mine!" in reference to Lonnie. It was eventually separated from Lonnie, but just before it departed, the thing vowed it would return to another. The Warrens brought the black lace veil, goat horns, cup, and the Conjuring book home with them so she would be safe from possession, but the tale of the veil doesn't end here. Months later, when Ed was in a meeting with a lady who was manifesting different personalities, some male, some female, and some that couldn't even be called human, but all making extremely threatening statements, her eyes began to wander, and when they landed on the black veil, she jumped up, grabbed the veil, and clutched it to her chest. Her features immediately began to transform into those of a wild, sneering creature distinct from the otherwise attractive girl. Ed drew 2 vials of water to himself, one unblessed, the other blessed by an exorcist, and moved away from what was no longer this woman, but an inhuman spirit, a lesser devil of hell. Horrid moaning and various animal sounds came from the girl as Ed blessed her, banishing the demon away for now a second and final time. And that brings us to the end of our list, and I'm glad all of those items are still kicking around the Warren Museum for safety and not out in the open.
Number 5, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of Abramelin, or more formally, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, is an old Jewish magic text that is thought to date back at some point in the 14th or 15th century. Now, it wasn't the initial publication of this book that gave it its notoriety. Instead, it was when it was 19th and 20th century magicians who were in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a British secret society dedicated to the practice, research, and upholding of old occult magic ways. But hush hush, you didn't hear that from me. One of the founders of the Golden Dawn, SLM Mathers, created the first ever English translation of the book in the 1890s, drawing from a previously established 17th century French translation. Now, Mathers' translation quickly became the definite magic text of the 19th century, eventually helping inspire Aleister Crowley to inspire his system of magic, the legendary occultist and fixture of one of the best Ozzy Osbourne songs ever. That solo still goes, man. Now, there's all kinds of spells and magic inside this text. Some real highlights include spells on how to conjure somebody and turn them into a donkey, how to summon a monkey to do your bidding, that sounds great, and how to bring forth spirits to fetch you goods. The big key point in this text, however, is an epic, multi-month spanning ritual that, if performed correctly, will allow the sorcerer to commune with their own guardian angel. The book theorizes that everyone has a guardian angel and that they are another part of their essence, a spiritual other half of yourself. The ritual involves, I don't know how to say this politely. You have to, they say you have to get blissfully intimate with your other half. Once the honeymoon period is over, the caster then has to summon up and conquer unredeemed spirits of the infernal regions of hell to conquer them. And then they'll be able to master the spirit domain. That sounds like a lot of irredeemed spirits. I hope my angel might help out a little bit with that. This all sounds very complicated, so all things considered, maybe it's for the best that this one's locked away. Seems like heavy reading, not before bedtime. And if you're looking for more true tales of terror, fake frightening fribs, cursed relics, ancient evils, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, ghouls, goblins, and pretty much everything spooky you can think of, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. Stay subscribed, but way more importantly, stay scary. Okay, let's keep going. Whole lot more video to get through. Number 4, Book of Soyga. The Book of Soyga, also known by a more complicated name, the Alderia Siva Soyga Vocor, is an occult text that hails back from the 15th century. I'm pretty sure just saying that name out loud in front of the camera, I probably caused a curse on the office, so I'm sorry about that. This text would have been lost to time, just another forgotten cursed manuscript, if it weren't for the obsessive efforts of John Dee, a 16th century polymath who had his hands in just about every field of study. Polymath is a fancy word for a guy who studies just about everything, and Dee practiced chemistry, physics, astronomy, and also the occult. You know, there's always more to learn, right? Mr. Dee was particularly interested in contacting angels to learn the secrets of the universe. And this book contains a litany of recipes for magic spells and all sorts of writings on demonology and astrology, but most importantly, and what caught Mr. Dee's attention, is that the book is said to include the names and genealogies of all of heaven's angels. Dee believed that the book contained an ancient divine message written in a language spoken to by Adam, the true unspoiled word of God. That's a pretty big statement. Now, much like the Voynich manuscript, which I'll mention a little later in the video, so put a pin in that for now, it had 36 cryptic tables that remained undeciphered for centuries. Dee attempted at one point to crack the code with the help of a mystic who convinced Dee that he could channel the angels for him. Dee allegedly was so desperate to unlock the contents of this book that when his mystic told him it was part of the ritual that he be allowed a night with John Dee's wife, he agreed. That's the oldest trick in the book, man. The old "I'll let you talk to angels if I can go out with your wife" gamble. Ugh, can't believe you fell for it. Dee's wife would end up birthing a son, Theodore Dee, the fatherhood of which was disputed, to say the least. John Dee was never able to crack the code in his lifetime and decipher the Book of Soyga, and perhaps for the best, as it was said he was warned that man was never meant to uncover those secrets, and that knowledge would end his life. The book is now said to reside in the British Library, although digital copies are available. Read it at your own risk, and if somebody says they can translate it for you, just make sure you really read everything on the fine print in the contract before you sign that, okay? Just looking out for you. Number 3, the Grand Grimoire. That is so fun to say. This next entry has been nicknamed the Gospel of Satan. So if you're looking for an indication as to whether or not this book is, evil, there you go. They had to put that on a sticker, put it on the cover right next to the Oprah's Book Club recommendation. This book is said to have originally been written by a man possessed by the devil sometime in the 16th century. It's an infamous occult text and is said to contain dark incantations, spells and rituals, tools on how to force demons to do one's bidding, and even some instructions for a little necromancy 101 for fledgling dead raisers. It's not all brimstone and hellfire though. There are also reports on how to make pacts with spirits for personal gain, rituals to win the lottery, talk to ghosts, make yourself invisible, and even adorably, how to win love. Never heard of a demon working to help someone fall in love. Now, all that sounds cool, definitely. I know I would love to have like a little skeleton minion who could help me with chores, maybe be like my little buddy. I love playing a necromancer in Skyrim, but these things don't really work out if you don't know what you're doing. Take a look at Full Metal Alchemist, that didn't work. They didn't know what they were doing. Even opening this book is considered equivalent to selling your soul to the devil. Soon as you crack the spine, it's like signing the contract. Because of the book's nefarious reputation, the original copy of the manuscript has been sealed away inside the Vatican's secret archives and not currently available to the public. So I don't think whatever they're listing on Amazon as the Grand Grimoire for $10 is the real Grand Grimoire. Number 2, the Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript has got to be one of my favorite stories of a mysterious manuscript like ever. I guess that's why I put it at number 2. Unlike a lot of entries on this list, it's actually very easy to come across a digital copy of the Voynich manuscript. It's available to read online. The only trouble is reading it honestly probably won't do you a lick of good, since it's written in a language no one has ever heard of and there's no record of it ever having existed. Yale University has the entire thing up and available online if you're feeling confident enough that you can take a crack at it and feel like banging your head against a brick wall for a few hours. The book is a handwritten, hand-illustrated codex of 240 pages of pure mystery, featuring gorgeous illustrations and typography, and what the book is about is your guess is as good as mine, honestly. Carbon dating suggests that it stems from the 15th century, and analysis of the style of the text and illustrations within suggests that it could have been penned during the Italian Renaissance. But just about every single aspect of this thing is shrouded in mystery. We don't even know what it's truthfully called. The Voynich manuscript is the name it was given after the initial owner, Wilfrid Voynich, purchased it in 1912 and brought it to public attention for the first time. Sorry, not the first owner. I'm sure several other people owned it before him. As such, the language inside the book is occasionally referred to as Voynichese. Now, some pages are missing, lost to time completely, and the pages we do have are just a puzzle. Some are foldable sheets of various sizes. Some pages have wondrously drawn diagrams or illustrations showing things like plants, some fictional, some real, and astrological symbols, drawings of people. Over the years, there have been several efforts to try and decode and document the book and figure out just what it is. A prevailing theory, admittedly a boring one, is that it's a guide to botany written in a mysterious script, a forgotten language, an uncrackable code, an incredibly convoluted hoax. Of course, with any good mystery, there are some wild theories. Some say the Voynich manuscript could be written from an extraterrestrial gifted to humanity, or written in demonic script perhaps, or that biblical language that we were mentioning in the book Soyga a few points ago. Like I said, it's available online, so I leave this up to you. If you manage to crack it, let us know down below in the comments. We're all clamoring for it. And number 1, the Codex Gigas. When it comes to cursed and demonic books, the Codex Gigas is one of the biggest ones around. Like, literally. Codex Gigas translates to giant book, which isn't exactly a scary name. When you see the size of this behemoth, it starts to make a little bit more sense. This thing is massive. 2 feet long. Now, giant, oversized, illuminated manuscripts were pretty common around the area the book was penned, but this one stood out for its immense size and the dark rumors surrounding the supposedly cursed text. Don't even try reading this thing, just lifting it will give you a hernia. That's the curse. It's occasionally been dubbed Satan's Bible due to the legend surrounding its origin. It's a good story, so get cozy. Supposedly, the legend goes that a monk by the name of Herman the Recluse, which is also what they used to call me, was condemned to death for heresy and was to be walled up alive and starved. In a desperate plea to save himself, Herman tried to convince the prior and the abbot as a whole that if he could pen a manuscript to honor God's glory, and that it would contain all of human knowledge and all of human history in one book, and if he could pen it in one night, he would be let free. The abbot agreed, thinking this was, of course, impossible. Herman wrote until midnight, wearing his fingertips down, and in a moment of desperation, made a prayer to Lucifer and asked for his eternal soul in exchange for the book's completion in order to repent for his sins. I totally get it. You know, I gotta be honest, I have done some pretty nutso stuff trying to make sure my scripts get in time for deadline. Haven't quite sold my soul to the devil yet. I usually just rail Red Bulls, but I'd probably make a similar deal under a similar deadline. Now, I don't want to poke any holes in Herman's logic here, but I will say maybe selling your soul to the devil is part of the reason you got into this mess in the first place, because that does sound a little bit like heresy, but it's not my place to judge. I'm not an archdeacon. A variation of the legend states that Herman worked for years on the manuscript, day and night, but still was unable to complete it in his lifetime and asked for the devil's assistance. Anyway, no matter the story, the legend states that Satan signed the Bible with a particularly terrifying illustration of himself. I mean, take a look at it. It's horrifying looking. The book contains a birth of information. Like they said, it was supposed to be everything humanity had attained up to that point in one big book. These days, the Codex Gigas is preserved in the Natural Museum in Sweden, where you can admire the penmanship of Herman the Recluse and his ghost author, Satan.
In 5th place, we're starting with a lesser-known artifact from the Warrens' home. What appears to the innocent eye as nothing but a long black spike, perhaps left over from a construction project of sorts, holds a history of sadness and evil doing. Being the oldest item listed today, its history dates back to its use in the 1700s. While the name of the witch it belonged to has been lost to time, the spike was originally used in a black mass ritual, in an attempt to summon Satan himself to this world. The witch we're speaking of had attempted to curse the stake over the course of her pregnancy, hoping that it would become strong enough to take the soul of her womb in exchange for the devil. During the ritual, she plunged the stake into the flesh as sacrifice, but while it strengthened her relationship with Satan, it did not succeed in bringing him to Earth. The stake was passed down as a family heirloom, bringing a feeling of longing and sadness to any that held it, until it was finally acquired by the Warrens. Moving along to 4th place, we're discussing the only item on this list that's made its way to Hollywood: Bathsheba's jewelry box. In January 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange occurrences almost immediately. It started with events that most of us probably wouldn't even register. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to move from place to place on its own. See, I'd personally be chalking that up to my ADHD. 2 young girls of the home began to notice spirits around the house. Carolyn then brought it upon herself to research the history of the home and discovered that it had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of them had passed under mysterious or horrible circumstances. The most haunting spirit in the home is that of the witch, Bathsheba Sherman. Fairly well off, Bathsheba and her husband Judson had a son, Herbert L. Sherman, born when Bathsheba was approximately 37 years old. While the couple gave birth to 3 others, they weren't able to survive past the age of 7. One of the passings of a neighbor's child in her care drew public attention during a post-mortem examination, when it was determined that the fatal wound was caused by a large sewing needle that had been impaled at the base of the skull. It's believed that Bathsheba took offense to Carolyn moving into what she considered her home and wanted to take back that control. The most notable incident being one afternoon when Carolyn said that she had been lying on the sofa and out of nowhere felt a piercing tip of pain in her calf, and then the muscle began to spasm. Upon examination, she noticed a puddle of blood at the point of impact. She checked for bees or anything else that could have caused the puncture in her leg, but found nothing. In her daughter's book, Andrea Perron described the wound as perfectly circle, as if a large sewing needle had impaled her skin. Now, if I were to summarize the entire hell the Perron family endured for the decade that they lived in what they refer to as the Old Arnold Estate, we'd be here for an hour. But during one of the last instances where the Warrens were called in to help the ailing family, they removed the box from the home after thoroughly blessing it, believing that it was acting as a conduit for Bathsheba's demonic energy to affect the home. Moving on to our 3rd place, we have the Conjuring mirror. Unlike the last artifact on our list, this has nothing to do with the Hollywood franchise. Originally belonging to a 45-year-old New Jersey man named Oliver Birnbaum, it was used to practice a medieval ritual known as speculum, or mirror magic. He performed a lengthy incantation ritual known as a conjuring formula, inviting the spirit world to assist him in manipulating the future. In the beginning, Oliver saw very little in the mirror, other than the movement of blurred forms or quick little incidents that meant nothing to him. But the more he concentrated his attention into the mirror, the more control Oliver gained, and ergo, the more he could see. After performing this ritual obsessively for many months, he got to the point where all he had to do was state what he wanted to see and the desired image would appear, eventually being able to tune into the future whenever he wanted. He gained the ability to project people he didn't like into the mirror, singling them out for punishment or revenge. The unknowing victim would be shown in a future situation, and Oliver would will misfortune to that person, being able to see his justice occur in the mirror just the way he planned it. And while this sounds like a fun projection of one's imagination, these malicious acts would actually be carried out by inhuman spirits. In order to make a victim fall down the stairs, a spirit would either momentarily disorient the person, apport some grease on a step, or go so far as to give the victim a psychokinetic push. Eventually, Oliver neglected the part of the ritual where he had to give homage to Satan, and as a result, the evil he proposed for others began to occur to him, along with the spirits that he turned loose on his enemies, now infesting his own home instead. After about a week of torture, this man was so terrified that he called a prominent Catholic official and begged him to send a demonologist to his house. When the Warrens arrived at the address, they met a man frightened out of his wits, and rightfully so. Doors were opening and closing by themselves. Every minute, something would crash and break or bounce off a wall and smash. Ed was able to reverse the ritual originally enacted by Oliver and bless the house, stopping the disturbance. As the Warrens were about to depart, Oliver insisted that they take the mirror with them, and the 5-foot-tall antique now lives in their museum. In 2nd place, we have the black lace veil. Now, while I obviously love the idea of a cute gothy aesthetic, this is anything but. After one of their public lectures, Ed was conversing with a couple that had been in the audience, where the boy introduced himself as Alan and explained that he'd brought his girlfriend Lonnie to the lecture because he suspected that she'd been overtaken by some occult influence. He explained that when his girlfriend became angry, her features would change into something resembling a wolf, and then the voice of a different person would speak from inside of her. When Lorraine walked over to join the group, Lonnie experienced an episode of instantaneous possession and lurched out in an attempt to attack Lorraine. This incident terrified everyone in the vicinity, with Thorns ending the audience chat session immediately. Before Ed escorted the couple to an offstage room, but Lorraine stayed outside. In the backstage room, the girl was fully under possession, breathing heavily, and her facial features had transformed into the wolf-like appearance the boy had talked about. After about 10 minutes, the possession passed, and Lonnie was lucid enough to explain dealing with memory loss, along with losing hours and days of her life over the last 3 months, a symptom that is common in possession. She went on to share her background. She was a girl wealthy enough to buy whatever she wanted, but money can't always buy love. Originally, her now boyfriend Alan had refused all of her advances and bribery attempts at becoming hers, and she had resorted to visiting a store prominent in selling tools to help with witchcraft, purchasing there a book on the black arts, and later that night performing a ritual for acquiring lovers. This ritual involved, you guessed it, the black lace veil, on top of which she placed a crown of goat horns before renouncing God and her baptism, along with swearing allegiance to Satan, finishing the ritual by washing down the vow with a cup of animal life force. You know, simple stuff. About a month after Lonnie performed the ritual, Alan began paying her the attention she craved, making her entitled world perfect. What she hadn't counted on, however, was that she was in debt to the demonic, having given them permission to enter her life. Ed knew immediately that Lonnie would have to undergo an exorcism as soon as possible and made contact with a priest the next morning, who was able to come and assist with the procedure. Upon arrival, the priest insisted on testing the spirit. He instructed Lonnie to close her eyes and slowly count to 20, while his assistant stood behind her and placed a cross 6 inches behind her head. The entity possessing the girl suddenly went wild, screaming, "Take it away! It burns! Take it away!" During the exorcism, it kept screaming, she's mine, her soul is mine," in reference to Lonnie. It was eventually separated from Lonnie, but just before it departed, the thing vowed it would return to another. The Warrens brought the black lace veil, goat horns, cup, and the Conjuring book home with them so she would be safe from repossession. But the tale of the veil doesn't end here. Ed received a phone call one day from a man named John Rand, who wanted him to meet his daughter Charlene, who he explained possessed a natural knowledge of what he took to be witchcraft. When she stared at people, even when they weren't aware of it, she'd fill their mind with inhuman terror. John called Ed specifically because Charlene was manifesting different personalities, some male, some female, and some that couldn't even be called human, but all making extremely threatening statements to John and his wife. Upon bringing Charlene to various doctors and clergymen, they recommended John be put in contact with Ed, and Ed agreed to have the girl and her father visit his home the next weekend. When Ed attempted to shake Charlene's hand upon meeting her, she backed away and stared distressfully at him, keeping track of every move he made. His attempts to question her resulted in no-end answers, and her eyes began to wander about the room in boredom. When they landed on the black veil, Charlene jumped up, grabbed the veil, and clutched it to her chest. Her features immediately began to transform into those of a wild, sneering creature distinct from this otherwise attractive girl. Ed drew 2 vials of water to himself, one unblessed, the other blessed by an exorcist, and moved away from what was no longer Charlene, but an inhuman spirit, a lesser devil of hell. Horrid moaning and various animal sounds came from the girl as Ed blessed her, banishing the demon away for now a second time. These items have since been locked away in the museum. And finally, in first place, we have the Ouija board recovered from the Donovan household. 15-year-old Patty Donovan came across the Ouija board and decided to use it to find a friend. From the first yes in response to her queries, Patty was hooked. She spent months falling in love with a spirit she believed to be in love with her, telling it intimacies about her everyday life. After about a year of telling all of her secrets to the board, Patty had become emotionally dependent on the spirit, asking it one night to reveal her future. During the very long session, it laid out a scenario of Patty's life for the next 6 years, providing specific details, right down to the date of the birth of her first child and the fact that she would have a total of 3 children by 1978. All information that would eventually prove true. Being as dependent as she was, on the evening of March 2nd, Patty now pleaded for the spirit to manifest. The next morning, Theodore Donovan found the spark plug wires pulled out of his car, the rubber hoses unfastened, and the fan belt cut out when he was attempting to start his vehicle. Not much later, Patty attempted to start her car. It was discovered later that the internal engine had been completely disassembled. That week, other incidents of apparent vandalism occurred around the Donovan house. Foundation shrubs were yanked out of the ground, roots and all. On the roof, a 6-foot cast iron pipe, which held electrical wires, tires was found bent at a 90-degree angle. On Friday, March 8th, Ted marked one flat on the kitchen calendar. No sooner did Patty get her car back from the shop than one of her other tires lost air. The next day, Saturday, her father made the same entry on the calendar, although this time it seems the tire had been cut with a knife. In the meantime, Patty could no longer raise her invisible boyfriend on the Ouija board. Night after night, she tried to communicate, but the planchette would simply slide over to goodbye. She had no idea that her ethereal beau had actually manifested in the form of a supernatural vandal. By the second week of March, material damage to the house and cars had become so troublesome that Ted had complained to the police. When they arrived, he pointed out the destruction done to the garden plants and shrubs, the exterior of the house, and the apparent intrusion into a locked garage to puncture the tires and tear engines apart. Before leaving, the policemen assured Ted that they'd keep an eye on the property during night patrols. Later that second week, after work, Ted and his wife Ellen were sitting in the kitchen with their son Brian when all three heard something smash against a wall somewhere inside the house. Cautiously moving to investigate, they found a gaping 18-inch hole in the plasterboard wall in Brian's room. Just as upsetting was the fact that the jagged edges of the plasterboard were pointing inwards, with the blow coming from inside the walls. Listening in the dark that night, Ted heard the sound of a board being pried loose, but after checking the entire house thoroughly, found no loose boards. The house was further plagued by loud noises every night that only escalated in frequency and volume, along with further unexplainable damage to the walls. On April 1st, furniture began to levitate, with a 250-pound dresser flinging its contents while flying erratically. Rocks had also begun to rain from the sky, pelting only the Donovan house, which the police bore witness to. Ted eventually broke down at work and explained the horror of his to his supervisor, who urged him to reach out to the Warrens. Ted instead tried moving his family into a hotel at first, and the spirits followed the family there, destroying the room and making so much noise that the family was thrown out of the hotel and forced to return home. Finally contacting Ed and Lorraine, they arrived in Maine as quickly as they were able to, finding the home in complete disarray. Lorraine said nothing, although at the time she sensed in the home the presence of entities so numerous and threatening that she had to fight with herself to keep from going back outside. After a lengthy tour of the house, Ed and Lorraine conducted an interview with the entire family, where Patty's history with the Ouija board was revealed. The Warrens then contacted the Catholic Church to begin the process for an exorcism to be granted, which sadly took a month. The family experienced many more unexplainable horrors during that time. Oh, let me know in the comments if you'd like me to go through their entire story in another video. After the exorcism took place on May 2nd, the family was finally free of the demonic torment, but left with over $5,000 in damages to their home, which would be over $30,000 in today's money. And now that I'm wishing I lived for my old cross necklace in my jewelry box this morning, that's the end of our list. Honestly, with all of the artifacts the Warrens have collected over the years and the details they've shared with the public, it was a struggle to narrow it down for today.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the organ. Thankfully, it's not an internal organ or anything like that, although, to be honest, I'm not so sure that would be any more creepy than this haunted musical instrument. Organs always tend to have a spooky sound to them, whether it's that classic bit from Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, or some old hymnals echoing through an empty church. The pipes and keys combine to create spine-chilling music more often than not. It's a classic sound used to elicit fear and atmosphere in all sorts of different environments. So of course the Warrens brought one back to the museum. It's not a grand affair, definitely not a pipe organ or anything close to one in size and scope. However, it does make up for a general lack of volume and dynamics with an array of haunted energy. The main thing that tends to set people off about this musical instrument is the fact that it likes to play itself. It's not a player piano, nor is there any sort of mechanism inside that would suggest that it was ever meant to make music without the help of a musician. But when the clock strikes 9 p.m., or the museum's apparent witching hour, this keyed instrument starts to play. I'm sure the first person to discover this detail was sufficiently spooked. Playing on its own isn't the only oddity associated with the organ. It's also known to cause anomalous things to happen to folks who play it. One might see a strange man standing beside the stool as they play, or maybe they'll have dreams full of haunting music for a while. If you go in and hit a few keys on this organ, maybe even sit down and play a fugue, all sorts of unfortunate events may be in your near future. After the organ was retrieved from the supposedly haunted house of a reverend, it was placed in the museum. Interestingly enough, no anomalous activity was reported before it was brought back. However, the Warrens were no slouches when it came to decorating, and soon enough the organ was covered in all sorts of other interesting oddities. Now, this idea I came up with on my own, so don't take it as a fact or ask me to cite anything. But what if the things the Warrens placed upon the organ caused it to become haunted? Maybe the curses dwelling inside of those objects came out and played the organ themselves. Food for thought, for sure.
Coming in number 4, we've got human skulls. Speaking of objects that may or may not be cursed but also make for great decorations, the Warrens had quite the collection of human head tops. The pearly white bone matter that makes up the shield for our most important organ. That's right, plenty of human skulls in the museum. And not just for archaeological and medical purposes, these were skulls supposedly used in different satanic rituals. Oh boy. There's one in particular that stands out thanks to its interesting coloration and decorations. The eye sockets are painted bright pink and really pop, and some of the teeth are a yellowy gold, and there is a large star adorning most of the skull's forehead. It's placed on an ornate stand among a plethora of other spooky knickknacks. I guess I shouldn't really be comparing a human skull to a knickknack, but here we are. Now, like I said before, the human skulls accumulated by the Warrens were supposedly used in satanic rituals quite a few times. I can't really elaborate on exactly what that would look like, but the fact that they were there means that it's possible the skulls are now cursed. The demons contacted during said rituals could have left some sort of residual energy in and around the skulls, especially because they did originate from humans. Folks have been terrified of satanic rituals for ages, often using them as shorthand for scary, morally depraved activities. We might not be able to figure out exactly what happened with these skulls, but they definitely hold some sway over folks who might visit the museum. It's morbid, it's creepy, and it smacks of the paranormal. Just hope that this kind of thing never ends up happening to your skull. Or you know what, maybe you'd prefer that the top of your head ends up in a museum. That's one way to stick around for a while, right? Coming in at number 3, we've got the haunted music box. Just another classic spooky object. Where would we be today without spring-wound machines that generate tinkly renditions of famous tunes? I feel like every 10 movies or so there's a shot of a haunted music box. Maybe that's a thing of the past at this point, but we do know that the Perron family dealt with a whole lot of nonsense stemming from a music box in the first Conjuring movie. Some things that appear in the Hollywood flicks don't actually exist in the real world, and they're just there to add some intrigue. The samurai suit and the Feely Mealy game were a couple examples of that, but we'll leave it at that for now. We'll focus back on the music box instead. After playing a big role in the exorcism of Bathsheba, it gained some wicked notoriety. Folks who had seen the movie assumed that this object was cursed in exactly the same way. That's not really the case, but it is fun to imagine, right? Music boxes are classic vessels for curses, especially thanks to the general creepy vibe the music can give off. How many cheap horror creations make use of a distorted music box song and some creepy childish laughter? Actually, keep the number to yourself, I already know it's way up there. Coming in number 2, we've got the white dress. Another urban legend staple, white dresses tend to show up in ghost stories often. Murdered brides, young women gone too soon, mothers who outlived their children, the works. It's hard to pin down where the phenomenon started, but we do know that it's timeless and effective. So of course, there's a haunted white wedding dress at the Warren Occult Museum. I'd be disappointed if there wasn't. In the Conjuring franchise, this dress is said to compel any who wear it to kill their fiancé. However, that's just more movie magic. There's no such tale actually associated with the museum. However, they do display a bridal gown, veil and all, and there is a supposed story that goes along with it. It's meant to represent the White Lady of Union Graveyard in Connecticut, a classic urban legend that we've definitely touched on here before. It's the tale of an unfortunate soul who roams the roads at night, causing accidents and freaking out motorists. Apparently one time she even materialized and put a dent in someone's fender. Unfortunately, the white dress in the museum isn't actually from the White Lady or anything related to her. It's just meant to represent the legend, add a little bit of class to the joint. Because who doesn't love looking at a pretty white dress? And finally at number 1, we've got the Conjuring mirror. To cap things off, we'll talk about a particularly spooky reflective surface, the Conjuring mirror. No relation to the actual Conjuring films though, so far anyway. This is one that has a truly terrifying story attached to it. The idea of mirrors as portals to other worlds is well documented, with different cultures around the world coming to similar conclusions about these shiny planes. People often see things they wish they hadn't in a mirror, which is especially true of the one at the Warren Occult Museum. It's said that if you look into it for long enough, you'll start to see conjured spirits. In fact, the mirror apparently does its best to conjure these spirits upon the user. The story goes that Ed and Lorraine came into possession of it after its previous owner stared into the mirror for weeks on end. For a while nothing happened, but eventually it conjured up a series of faces and figures so gruesome and horrifying that the man lost his mind entirely. He was sent to a mental institution and the mirror was sent to the Warrens. Since then, people have looked into the mirror, but definitely not for weeks at a time. I wonder what would happen if someone replicated the experiment. Coming in at number 5, we've got a vampire coffin. Say what? The resting place of an undead bloodsucker? In this museum? Well, what happened to the previous tenant? Was it forceful eviction, or maybe a what we do in the shadows scenario where a vampire hunter snuck in through the basement and exposed an ancient vampire to sunlight? Regardless of how they came into possession of this burial box, the story probably isn't too pleasant. Still though, what a find. According to Ed and Lorraine, the coffin once belonged to a modern-day vampire, but they didn't really elaborate too much on the details. That kind of vagueness just makes me want to know more, you know? Unfortunately, that story may have died with the famous couple, but we can definitely consider a whole plethora of options. There are all sorts of implications that come along with someone claiming to possess a vampire's coffin. How modern are we talking here? Were there other vampires in this one's undead community? Are they trying to blend in with the rest of society at this point, or is it a John Carpenter's vampires scenario where they're looking for more blood than ever? There haven't been too many sightings of vampires lately, at least by my count, so one has to wonder what's been going on. Twilight is trending again, so there's gotta be some sort of vampiric element in the air. A couple more months till October and then we'll know for sure. I wonder if there's anything inside the Warrens' coffin. I guess we can't really check at this point, but hey. If anyone has visited or seen someone open the coffin, would you be so kind as to drop the details down in the comments? I'd love to know if there are any rosaries, fangs, or vampire bones left behind. Maybe even some scorch marks that might suggest that the vampire did indeed get burned. Gosh, a modern vampire. I wonder if they like video games or watching sports on TV. Coming in number 4, we've got cursed photographs. Cue the Nickelback jokes. Look at this photograph. Every time I see it makes me suffer. Not as catchy, but you get the point anyway. While none are particularly legendary, you can definitely assume that any photographs at the museum have a creepy backstory. I'm actually kind of surprised more cursed photos aren't circulating these days. It seems like a lot of photographs with spirits and curses imbued within are from the age of the darkroom, or even before that. Do you think that tin-type pictures were more likely to be cursed? I suppose there was the good old practice of death photos. Plus, plenty of folks got included in family photos, even post-mortem, because the experience of having your picture taken was so rare. Folks have a lot more opportunities to snap pics of their friends and family these days, so images of corpses made up to be more alive are probably less common, at least as far as I know. The internet is a deep and dark place, and I'm sure there are folks who would pay top dollar for something like that taken with a mirrorless DSLR. Oh boy. Back to the museum though, there are entire walls covered in creepy old photographs. It kind of feels like a haunted house attraction at a theme park sometimes, now doesn't it? We've got brides with their faces totally obscured, white dress and all. Are those flowers symbolic or something? I guess we can't really know. Images of sinister looking men in hunting garb adorn the walls as well, making folks wonder what their story might be. Sullen-faced children looking past the camera, images of demonic figures, questionably dark photographs of things difficult to make out, the works. To look at these photos is one thing, but to have one in your home is something else entirely. Thankfully, they're at the museum and not for sale. However, there is the good old theory that photos of the photos might bring the effects of the curse wherever they're viewed. So like the shadow doll, you might be done for just by looking at these pictures of pictures. Maybe consider investing in some holy water or seeking out the advice of a paranormal expert. Good luck with all that. Coming in number 3, we've got demonic masks. Masks hold such rich meaning all across different cultures. The obscuring of one's face can cause so many things to happen, both good and bad. There's the classic idea that once a person puts on a mask, they will finally act as their true self. Others know that masks can protect folks from recognition, whether that means from other humans or paranormal entities that want to take something from you. On stage and in day-to-day performance, masks are associated with deception and hiding one's identity. So when they're used in dark rituals or other haunted rites, they may be inhabited by things other than people. Take a walk around the museum and you will find a treasure trove of creepy and disturbing face coverings. Uncanny Valley inhabitants of the highest order, these creations of rubber and paint can really be upsetting to look at for too long. Red-faced demons, dirty hags, strange screaming mouths, and more. A lot of them remind me of classics from Halloween 3 and Goosebumps, two mask-based experiences that shaped my childhood in ways we can't really get into today. Don't put any of them on, for nobody knows what might be dwelling within. Could be a nice spirit, or even better, nothing. Although there's always the risk of a malevolent demon waiting within, eagerly anticipating the moment an unsuspecting victim dons the mantle. Maybe stick to medical masks for now. No demons should be waiting in there, plus you'll keep all your droplets to yourself. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Tombstones of Children. Yes, you heard that correctly. The Warrens had a collection of grave markers meant to sit above children who passed on. Now, in their defense, apparently these had been collected after they exorcised some demons raised through satanic rituals. The tombstones were not originally moved by the Warrens, but by those who would perform these dark deeds. The Warrens simply took them to the museum after all was said and done, likely in an attempt to prevent others from using them in further rituals. Definitely a strange collection to have, all things considered. Is there something about a child's tombstone that makes it extra potent for ritual use? I wonder what the rationale is behind that, other than sounding extra taboo. And finally, at number 1, we've got a haunted brick. On its own, a brick doesn't seem so bad. It's just a bit of dried clay, that's all. But this brick is special. It was taken from Borley Rectory, also known as the most haunted building in England. This home, built for the rector of the Borley parish, had gained quite a bit of notoriety before burning down and being demolished. After it was built, many claimed that it was haunted by a number of spirits. These claims multiplied when a paranormal investigator published an account of his visit in the Daily Mirror. From there, many more folks decided to see what all the hype was. People claimed to see little Victorian boys roaming the grounds, only to disappear without a trace. Cars have been assailed by phantom thumps, and ghost lights shine brightly in their mirrors. But why would a building built for a rector be haunted from day one? Well, there's an ancient rumor that Borley Rectory was built upon the same grounds that the Benedictine monastery once stood. It was here that a monk and a nun partook in a forbidden relationship, eventually culminating in their untimely deaths. Since then, their presences have been felt all over the grounds, causing bells to ring without anyone around, recording equipment to malfunction, candlesticks to be thrown, and animals to be spooked. The rectory and the monastery are gone now, but the Warrens did procure a piece of the famously haunted place before it fell. One has to wonder how much haunted energy is still imbued in this brick. Would you be willing to pick it up? Who thinks spending a night in this museum would be a fun time? You'd probably see some really spooky stuff, that's for sure. It's hard to tell which items are the scariest because when it comes to the occult, things are never as they seem. Coming in at number 5, we've got a mask of Hannah Crana. This item isn't necessarily intrinsically linked to the famous witch, but it is done up in her likeness and inspires folks to learn more about her magical ways. And that is impressive, so we'll talk about it. Way back when, in the far-off land of New England, there once lived a woman known as Hannah Crana. She was an individual with a particularly short temper and a tendency to demand things of her neighbors with nothing offered in return. Come on, Hannah. Now, oftentimes her neighbors would say no to these demands, resulting in a bit of a tantrum from Miss Crana. These could be scary and upsetting, but nothing too terrible, or so they thought. Often, after refusing Hannah Crana a favor, these neighbors would have some misfortune befall them, and because of the rumors circulating, they didn't usually chalk this up to simple bad luck. No sir, they suspected witchcraft. The idea compounded over time, especially as things seemed to get worse around Hannah. Her husband wandered off into the night and perished after falling off a cliff. This put even heavier suspicion upon Hannah, who at this point was deemed a witch by all of her neighbors. And Hannah Crana embraced this title with aplomb. Good for her, right? She took to walking around with her rooster, old Boreas, who many suspected to be her familiar. She cursed her baker neighbor to bake less tasty pies, and cursed a young fisherman to never catch a fish again. And eventually she foresaw her own death and made some more of her famous demands in relation to her burial. Her neighbors were told to carry her coffin to her grave by hand, not by cart. She also refused to be buried before sundown. Of course, when she kicked the bucket, they didn't want to deal with all this. But when they attempted to drag her coffin through the snow by sled, it would slide off and down the hill, forcing them to try again. And to top it all off, when they returned to Hannah Crana's home at the end of the ordeal, it had burned to the ground. A witch through and through. So be careful while looking at this mask. Who knows if somehow Hannah Crana could still be channeling power through it. Coming in number 4, we've got some satanic books. We've talked quite a bit about the allure and taboo that comes along with satanic rituals. When people find masks, dolls, tombstones, idols, and more associated with Satanism, they tend to get pretty freaked out. They tell tales about what these objects may have been used for in the past and generally attribute a whole lot of dark energy to them. Whether anyone doing this understands exactly what they're talking about is totally up in the air. It seems that every few decades or so there's a brand new satanic panic. X is leading to Y and it's going to corrupt our children. Why won't we think of the children? However, if folks took the time to attempt to understand what they were really talking about, I would bet that the panic might recede a little bit. The frantic reactions of the ill-informed will never stop, will they? On the many shelves of the Warren Occult Museum sit volumes and volumes of satanic books. These could be read by those afraid of what rituals might be impacting people around them, or they could sit there and look scary. If you're afraid of something, it is likely that you just don't understand it. Demystifying ideas and people and creatures is often a good way to really get to the core of what makes them scary, and then you can see them for what they really are. People would probably claim that all these satanic books at the museum are haunted or cursed or have a history of being used in evil rituals, but would never themselves read one to find out exactly what the contents entail. Maybe that saves them from being haunted, but also it could cause them to live in ignorance longer, using fear as an excuse to make broad assumptions and statements. I know this isn't a fantastic analysis of the actual books found at the Warren Occult Museum, but I feel like when discussing things like this, it can be helpful to encourage curiosity over fear. Who knows? Maybe you'll learn something useful. Hopefully without having to resort to rituals and sacrifices. Coming in number 3, we've got some samurai armor. I'll be honest right off the bat here. This armor, as creepy and cool as it is, doesn't actually exist. Like, it's showcased briefly in the Conjuring cinematic universe, but we don't learn all that much about it. The reason for the lack of apparent backstory is simple. They made it up for the movie. Bit of a letdown, I know. But for it to have screen time, that must mean that there is a wicked tale to be told about this battle-hardened human protector. It may have belonged to a famously brutal warrior, one who took the heads of all his victims on the battlefield. Their poor, unfortunate souls doomed to reside within the carapace until the end of time. Maybe the bloodthirsty soul of the samurai himself still resides in the armor. Perhaps the suit has a different story altogether, free from battlefield use. What do you think the story is behind this fictional item? Coming in number 2, we've got some glass eyeballs. They see you. In general, old school prosthetics fall under the uncanny valley classification. The folks making them didn't have the technology or experience to make them truly comfortable or convincing, so we often ended up with weird facsimiles of human body parts that are quite unsettling to look at. To be honest, I think the pirates had it right. Forget fake parts, let's just use peg legs and eye patches. Of course, that's not exactly the most dignified way to live one's life, and not everyone wants to look like a pirate with a hook for a hand. So even before we had high quality prosthetics for general use, folks did their best to make replacement parts. And so we ended up with stuff like this. 2 foggy glass eyeballs inside of what appears to be an Altoids tin, ready to peer into your soul at a moment's notice. That's a grim image. And apparently, these eyeballs are haunted. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it must be blood-curdling. Maybe they float around at night, suspended in the air, implying a face that nobody can see. Or maybe a ghost without eyes pops them in from time to time, completing a face that went to the grave missing a couple of ocular grapes. No matter how you slice this, you've got a pair of roly-poly, disembodied eyeballs that cannot and will not blink. Things they must have seen. And finally, at number 1, we've got a dark magic doll. Unsurprisingly, the Warrens had a massive collection of scary dolls. Annabelle and the Shadow Doll are just the beginning, and are likely so well known compared to the others thanks to their relative power. These two will act on their own and often cause mischief and misfortune without being prompted. The dark magic doll is a little different, where it's still imbued with a curse, but has to be used by a human to take effect. According to Tony Spera, son-in-law of the Warrens, it operates kind of like a voodoo doll. By adding an image of the person you're attempting to harm to it, you can use it to cause plenty of pain in their life. Make the doll look like your target, perform a quick ritual, and maybe add some of their hair to the equation and you're set. Then you hang the doll and wait for it to take effect. Apparently those who are targeted by the effects of this magic doll will soon fall ill and eventually succumb to this illness. So don't be messing around with it for no reason. You've got to go in with intent. And just for funsies, please let us know if that's something you plan on doing in the future. So we know. We're not worried or anything, no way. Coming at number 5, we've got the Satanic Idol. Now, Satan is usually quite a controversial figure. In the past, any mention of the name would have been associated with something terrible, especially as satanic panic swept the nation. Why won't anyone think of the children, right? We love to assign weird moral values to stuff to ensure our political weight can be thrown around, but I'm getting off topic. These days, the jury is out on Satan. Many folks love the guy and worship him as ardently as anyone else would worship their deities. Some say he's a more forgiving figure than plenty of other gods and demigods. However, this idol doesn't seem to be associated with that end of the satanic spectrum. This one comes from the bowels of hell and brings with it misfortune and terror, or so they say. Let's take a look at this interesting oddity. With a misshapen horned head, piercing blue eyes, and a strange, unnaturally slim body, this doesn't necessarily look like the powerful demon most folks would assume is Satan. Artists can take liberties with the things they create, so don't write it off simply simply based on its looks. Apparently, a young hunter had been scavenging through the woods in Connecticut when he stumbled upon this cursed idol. He didn't really know what to do with it, but he took it along just as well. Soon after coming into possession of this horned artifact, he ran into an old man in dark robes, one telling tales of doom and horror. This, of course, spooked the hunter, who discussed this interaction with his friends. Eventually, after some sleepless nights and anxiety, he was put in contact with the Warrens, who came by to evaluate the idol. They deemed it haunted indeed and took it off the poor guy's hands. I'm sure he was very glad to be free of it. Ed and Lorraine strapped the devil thing in and brought it back to their museum, where it still remains. So if you ever get a hankering for some devil worship or really want to look into some Gollum-esque blue eyes, you know where to go. Just be careful. That cloaked man in the woods is said to have been a worshipper of Satan, using the idol in dark and terrible rituals. I'm sure it's safe in the museum, but who knows. Coming in number 4, we've got the toy monkey. What is it about old school toys that makes them so creepy? Like, at some point in history, every single toy maker decided it was time to stop making them look that way and move on to much cuter, cuddlier, cooler, and overall less frightening things. Maybe tastes changed, or folks just collectively woke up to the fact that they were letting their kids play with nightmare objects, but regardless of the reason, I'm glad we've left these designs in the past. Dredging up these figures makes for some good spooky times though, right? Take this toy monkey for example. Would you buy your kids something like this these days? I'd wager no, and for good reason. Not only is it unsettling to look at, plenty of similar monkeys have been featured in the spookiest of scenes across Hollywood, but there's a lot of dark energy imbued in this particular monkey. The one at the Warrens Museum is said to carry a terrible curse. Hell, it was even featured in Annabelle Comes Home. So what does a little monkey have to do to earn such a reputation? Well, this one seems to stalk people, torment them, and then kill them. Oh no. Imagine this thing suddenly appearing in your life one day, then as time went on it started popping up in places you know you didn't leave it. Little monkey cymbals might be heard crashing in the middle of the night, and disembodied shuffling can keep you from sleeping. All that's creepy, but it's still just a toy, right? Hold up. Did its eyes just glow? That is some monkey business I want no part of. But hey, at least this one in particular is locked away and not to be recirculated into the general population of antique monkey toys. Well, for now anyway. Coming in number 3, we've got the Shadow Doll. Now, we've all got a particular cursed doll in mind when it comes to the Warrens, and now she's the star of a major motion picture franchise, so it seems that she's always gonna come in first. But there is another doll at the museum that should elicit at least the same amount of fear. That's right, I'm talking about the Shadow Doll. This thing is downright butt ugly. Like, Annabelle as an OG Raggedy Annie is kinda creepy, and they had to make sure they punched up the creepiness with some porcelain features and unnerving eyes for the movie. But if they made a movie featuring the Shadow Doll as is, I think they might actually have to make it less creepy. For real. I don't know if big movie theater chains would allow something like this on their screens. Feels like something out of a snuff film, maybe a low-budget exploitation flick. Nobody's looking at this and saying, oh yeah, I want to watch a whole movie based on this thing. Worse yet, the Shadow Doll seems to carry a much more terrible curse than most. Plenty of cursed dolls require you to be in the same room as them in order for the worst of the effects to hit you, but the Shadow Doll just needs you to view a picture of it to generate risk. Just looking at it means there's a chance it'll visit you in your dreams and kill you there, Freddy Krueger style. And based on looks, I don't think it would make it fun like Freddy does. It would just be brutal and upsetting. Goodness gracious. Coming in number 2, we've got the Pearls of Death. These are known for their outrageously dangerous powers. They might just look like a nice set of pearls waiting to be adorned by the fanciest of folk, but be warned, the glamour is not worth the price. And I'm not talking about how much you pay for them. No, it is not money that these pearls want, it is your life. Owners of this particular string of aquatic orbs have complained time and time again of the necklace constricting around their throat and choking them. According to the first woman to adorn herself with this luxurious item, she felt as if she was being strangled as soon as she put them on. She attempted to take them off, but was unsuccessful. Panicked, she rushed out to request help, and it took multiple people yanking on the string to finally set her free. Since then, people have been very reluctant to wear these pearls. Some believe that a Satanist or black magic worshipper cursed the necklace before it was given to the unfortunate woman, kind of like the opposite of a holy person blessing an object. How fun. I wonder if we got a priest in there, whether they could cancel out the curse. I suppose not too many people are willing to test whether or not the pearls are still strangling.